Are you ready for me to start beginning? Okay, here we go. I just got the go ahead. So, hi everybody. So stoked to share this opening cacao ceremony with you as part of the Global Unity Festival happening this weekend. Um, just by way of introduction, my name is Jonas. I am a chocolate maker in California, and I learned traditional chocolate making from a Zapotec elder outside of Oaxaca in 2012. And that experience catalyzed a whole journey with chocolate that has led me to making a whole lot of ceremonial cacao now for people all over the world. I source cacao from 5 different countries: Belize, Guatemala, Colombia, Tanzania, and Ecuador, from about 1,000 smallholder organic cacao farmers, many of whom are indigenous people. And that experience of working so closely with cacao and the people who grow it has really changed my life. And I'll be speaking to that throughout our ceremony today in a number of stories. Um, in case you're new to ceremonial cacao comes from the communities and the ecosystems that grow it. It does not come from large plantations, which is how the majority of the world's cacao is grown today for chocolate as candy. And that's the other thing about cacao, which is that cacao is a medicine. It is receptive of the energy given to it. It picks up wisdom from the ecosystem and love from the people who are paid good prices to grow it. So sitting with cacao is about relationship. And I'm going to tell you a few stories in our ceremony today that I carry close to my heart, because right now we need stories to inspire us, to heal us, to guide us. And my prayer is that these stories feed you in the same way that they feed me. So I'd like to begin our ceremony just with an invitation to get comfortable, make sure you have your cup of cacao available, and get a journal. And actually, if you don't have cacao, you can also do this ceremony with water. You could do the ceremony with tea. Really, any substance you can relate with. Cacao is just an amazing guide to help us tune into gratitude and connection and doing a ceremony. But that's really one of the amazing teachings about cacao, is that a ceremony is accessible to us without any outside substance. Um, but of course, it's tasty and fun with cacao. So take a moment, feel your feet on the earth wherever you are. Just make sure you're nice and settled. Let me take a deep breath. I'm taking off my shoes. All right. So we're going to open with gratitude for cacao. Cacao is an ancient species. It's thought to be 10 million years old genetically. By way of comparison, Homo sapiens diverged from our most recent ancestors about 500,000 years ago. So the cacao species, the Ora Cacao, has been around for about 20 times longer than we are. I keep this fact in mind to just humble myself when I come to this medicine, and to really think of it as an elder that carries a lot of wisdom that I can learn from. So let's all raise up our cups of cacao to the sky. This is a gesture of our humility, elevating the cacao above us, and it's also in gratitude to the sky, to the air element, to the very beautiful oxygen that fills our lungs effortlessly day in and day out. This oxygen comes from trees all over the planet that exhale the oxygen as they intake our CO2. And so just through this very act of breathing, we find ourselves in reciprocity with so many other species and the whole plant world. So thank you, air, for giving us the life in our lungs. And while we're up there, thank you also to all the celestial bodies that guide us, to the sun, to the moon, to the stars. We're affected by all of them too, in an eternal relationship with them. So thank you, air. We love you. Welcome, air, into this ceremony. And now lowering your cups of cacao all the way down to the earth. or onto your table. Feeling your feet, feeling your sits bones, just feeling the weight of your body, feeling the gravity. Let's give thanks to Pachamama. Thank you to this earth, this planet that we call home. Thank you to her fertile soils, all the life that's underneath their very feet. Thank you to the rock people, all the mineral, everything that's below us that gives us the foundation that we live upon, that we sleep upon, that we run around doing our busy lives upon, always underneath us without fail. So giving thanks for that stability, and also giving thanks for the tremendous abundance that comes forth from the earth, all the life that grows from the earth, all the food that comes from the earth. There's so many reasons to be grateful for our home here, and praying that we come into good stewardship of our home. So thank you, Pachamama, thank you, Mama Earth, for being our home. Thank you for always holding us. We love you, and welcome to this ceremony. And now bring your cups of cacao to your heart, kind of finding a nice niche right in your chest. And here we give thanks to water. Thank you to the sacred waters in these very cups of cacao. Thank you to our blood, which is our mirror of the earth's water cycle. Thank you to the rivers, to the oceans, to the little droplets of water evaporating up into the sky to form clouds, to the rain falling back to the earth, to the springs and the creeks forming rivers again. Thank you for weaving us in this incredible cycle of life as water beings made up 70% of the water element. Thank you for this gift of life again through the water element. We love you. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the ceremony, water. And lastly, extending your cup of cacao into the center of the community, towards the webcam in this case, but into the communal fire. We give gratitude to the fire element, to the warm fire that keeps us alive in the wintertime, to the heat of the sun that encourages us to come out and play in the summertime. Thank you to the fire in our hearts, the inspiration and passion that makes life worth living, to community and the sparkle that I see in people's eyes all across the world as they come together. And they come together to solve problems and inspire and relate. Thank you also for the renewal that the fire element brings. It's an immense force. We've seen extensive fires in California over the last few years, and it's humbling and such a good reminder to constantly cleanse and renew, cleanse and renew. So thank you, fire, for all your forms and for all the healing you bring to us. We love you, and welcome to this ceremony. And lastly, holding your cup of cacao right in the middle of the 4 points that we just traversed, and giving thanks to the great mystery, the element of ether, God, spirit, creator, however you call it. Giving thanks to the unknown, to magic, the mystery that this life is, the mystery that this time is. It's such a gift to be alive right now and to be in relationship with all that is non-human. Thank you for the pause, for the sacred silence, the mystery of not knowing what's next, and surrendering to the unfolding of everything in its perfection. Thank you, Ether. Thank you, Great Mystery. We welcome you to this ceremony and all other beneficial guides who desire to be present. And now, raising your cups of cacao right to your lips, and just not drinking yet, but inhaling and savoring the delicious aromas swirling up to your nose, and for a moment taking a pause to find a personal intention. for this ceremony, to just tune into something that you need help with, something that's alive in your life right now that you're seeking clarity on, anything like that, to just hold that right before you take this first sip. And then when you have it, cacao cheers. Let's enjoy our first sip of cacao all together, all around the world. Thank you, cacao. And just really allow your body to receive that first sip, all the flavors, the experience of having this cup of cacao. In chocolate making, we talk about a beginning, a middle, and an end of a flavored journey, so really see how the journey changes as you drink the cacao and it lingers in your mouth. Feel your body, feel if anything's already shifted, feel if you desire to take a deep breath in, and maybe nothing's happening, and maybe all sorts of things are happening. That's part of the magic of ceremony, is that a single cup, a single sip can be profound. The next time it's not, next time it's not again, and some other time it is profound again. You really never know. So just taking a moment to scan your body and see what you're bringing to this ceremony today. Who are you today? How did you wake up? How were your dreams last night? This is all information that we're bringing to Cacao to share with her, and then this becomes part of our relationship with Cacao. So I've been reflecting on the top few things that I've learned from 9 years of doing cacao ceremony. And since we have less opportunity for interactivity with each other over this live stream, I thought I'd share a few stories that come from my heart and that I carry in my heart, that really anchor me and that I come to for guidance in times that I need it most. And they're all linked to cacao. My life took an incredible turn when I began working with cacao. She's taught me so many things, and this first story is about relationship with all things. So for this story, we're going to visit Martine's Forest, which is a mile hike through hilly jungle from the nearest road and village in Belize. His farm is set so far into the jungle that when he first discussed planting it with his fellow villagers, they warned him that he would never be able to grow cacao there. But he had this calling to plant cacao out there, and so he followed his intuition and went out to the land to inquire. And the reason that his villagers counseled him not to try to grow cacao there was that all the animals would eat the cacao, which, besides humans, there's other animals that love cacao, especially monkeys, but also birds. So he went out there to ask for guidance and to see if there wasn't a way that he could plant cacao and come home with a harvest to sustain and nurture his family. And specifically, he climbed into a limestone cave, which overlooks the site where he would plant. And this limestone cave, in Mayan mythology, caves are quite sacred, and members of his village would quite regularly come to these caves to conduct various ceremonies, especially around the harvest and the planting time, for cacao and other crops. And so he went to this cave and he shared his reasons in his native language, Kichimaya, for wanting to grow cacao. And then he sat and he listened, and the response that he heard was that he could actually grow cacao there quite effectively if he also planted food for the animals. And for the monkeys especially, they wanted bananas. So what ended up, and what we saw when we visited him last year, was a cacao forest in the middle of the jungle that has had jaguar sightings on it that is surrounded by bananas. And the monkeys like bananas more than they like cacao. So the bananas tend to the monkeys, and then Martine gets all the cacao. This is such an amazing example of permaculture. It's such an amazing example of the kind of synergistic, collaborative solutions that we need to coexist with the rest of life on this planet. And it's rooted in a desire to relate with all things and not to impose our will on all things. You can see that in Martin's inquiry. He didn't just want to go there and clear the forest and do it. He probably wouldn't have succeeded if he did that. It's, instead rooted in a desire to relate with both the animate and the inanimate. This story is such a teaching in how to relate with cacao. If you come to an ancient medicine like cacao purely with the desire for a beneficial effect, like more energy or more health, you might have heard this, you might have experienced it one time in ceremony, and maybe you're not feeling your greatest today. That happens to me all the time. I wake up, I don't feel great, and I want more energy, or I know cacao is good for me, so I want the health benefits. But if we come to it purely from that place, we're missing the point. It's actually an extension of a very poisonous model that our whole society has grown up in, which is consume, consume, consume. So we have to pause ourselves, and we have to find our place where we're willing to actually engage in relationship with cacao, and or whatever we're taking into our bodies, and realize that it's a two-way relationship. In the instance of cacao, all the way from the people who grow it to your cups. When we last visited Martine, he took us to that cave, and I was blown away by the way that he interacted with the cave, because we were in some conversation walking up to the cave, and the moment we got to the threshold where the cave was visible, he interrupted us mid-conversation and shared a Kichimaya greeting to the cave. So he had that much respect for it, to pause our conversation abruptly and greet the cave. And then when we were in the cave, we actually prepared cacao, and we shared a cacao ceremony, opened with gratitude, and set some intentions. And he translated everything that we said from English into Kichimaya so that the cave could understand, because this is the language of the cave. The cave doesn't understand English. It's not an English cave. It's a Mayan cave. And so he translated everything. He took the time to translate everything into a language that the cave could understand, just like you would interpret something for a person. So I think that action is just self-evident, that when we show the world and all the non-human forms around us that kind of care and devotion, true magic can happen. So let's just take another sip of cacao in honor and in gratitude of all the relationships that we're in with people very close to us and all of the world beyond the human world, that we get to relate with on a day-to-day basis, and all the gifts that those relationships bring us. And may we find pause and opportunity to reflect on those relationships and how we can steward them better. Cheers. So, if plant medicines are all about relationships, but plants, well, some of you might argue with me, and I'm going to say actually plants do talk, but plants don't talk in the way that we've grown accustomed to thinking of things as talking. We think of talking as lips and tongues moving to make sounds, and plants don't talk in that way, but they do talk. They're quite talkative, cacao especially. And so how do we open the conversation with a plant like cacao? How do we speak its language? The key to working with plants is to begin the relationship with gratitude. Not only is gratitude a form of reciprocity, and it feeds life all around us, it's really the key. It creates the resonance in our own heart fields, to communicate at the same frequency and vibration that the plants want to communicate with. I've had the good fortune to sit with many indigenous wisdom carriers and hear their stories, and again, I've seen that they open with gratitude. Sometimes I know when I first encountered this, when I was in my mid-20s, and an elder would open with an hour of gratitude. My Western mind struggled with it. I thought, oh my goodness, I don't have time for this. This is going on and on and on, and how is this related to what we were going to talk about? But from the perspective of gratitude, it's actually the most important thing that happens in the whole meeting. They're the words that come before all else, and that's really where we need to focus our efforts. So it's really a life skill, and again, working with cacao can help you drop into meaningful gratitude. And I'm going to share another story about gratitude, which is a story of a miracle that I witnessed through giving gratitude, that is forever confirmed for me that practicing gratitude is one of the fundamental skills I need to develop as an adult human. So this story is in my mid-20s, when I first began working with cacao, when I first moved to Sonoma County. California had entered one of the more severe droughts in recent history. And it was around that time that a friend and I went on a run in the hills above the Pacific coast, and he showed me a spring. I'll always remember it because the spring isn't very obvious. It's about a mile from the road, and you come into this grove of trees. It's quite still there, and if you stop running, you'll actually hear the trickle of water, but it's unclear where it is until you realize you're actually standing right on top of it. And if you go around, there is an elder tree, the elder tree of that grove, and its roots create a small cave. And along the very back wall of that cave, there's water trickling down the roots, and that's the spring where it's coming out of the mountain. The cave is not big enough to stand in. I can only ever crouch in it. I'm 6'3" for reference, but I can only crouch in it. I always take off my shoes to enter, and it's a dark little nook with all sorts of roots and spiders and dripping water. It's always this portal to enter. And so I, a few years earlier, had been discovered spring water and just how amazing it feels to drink water that's never been running through a pipe. And that my body just liked it more and felt more alive when I drank spring water that I collected rather than water that came out of the faucet in my house. So I had made it a weekly habit to drive up about 20 minutes up into the hills, take my backpack filled with 6 empty gallon glass jars, and hike in about a mile, bringing along 2 funnels, and go out to the spring and pause before entering, take off my shoes, and take a moment to give gratitude, and then enter the cave to collect water. And so this was my weekly routine, and it really created this deep relationship with the land there, because all of a sudden I actually needed the land for something. I needed the land for my water, and that created something that was missing for me before. I had no idea where my water came from, or I knew it came from the Sierra Mountains, that it went through long aqueducts and pipes and came all the way over to the Bay Area. But I previously had been super disconnected from my water source, and to actually have to make time for it, but to also have this rich experience of being out on the land that gave me my water really became something that gave me a lot of meaning. So in the middle of the drought, the spring was actually doing quite well for a while, and so it felt like this weird, it kind of just like contrast of experiences where most of California was in drought and everybody was all fearful about water, and I was hiking up into the mountain here and having these profound experiences of sacred spring water coming out of the mountain and really relating with the water, and feeling very abundant in the water. Until one day, I went up to that spring. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was collecting water for the week. It was quite late in the afternoon. I knew that it was going to get dark soon, and I didn't have very much time to collect water, but I knew that it was worth the time, that water was better than anything else I could drink, and so I made the trip up. And I got to the spring, and it was flowing slower than I had ever seen it before. And as I was filling my first bottle, and it was like an eighth full, and then a quarter full, and then 3/8 full, but it was taking forever, and the sun was starting to set, and I could see the shadows getting longer outside the cave. It dawned on me that I might actually not get enough water to bring home, and that was, yeah, that was a whole new thing. That was scary. That was upsetting, and not knowing what to do. I put another bottle in at the back of the cave with the second funnel, trying to fill 2 bottles at the same time to speed up the process a little bit. And I closed my eyes. I was crouched in the cave with my feet on the earth, and put my hands down on the earth, and I began thinking about the water and all the ways that it would leave the spring, and the little creek that it would form, the birds that would come and drink the water from the creek and that would fly up into the sky, and the little water molecules in the bird flying about, and then how the creek would flow into a stream, and how deer would come to the stream, and then the same deer would jump across the land, and the water would go running through the deer all over the land and feast on wildflowers and grasses. And then I thought about the ocean, not more than 10 miles away, and how this creek would flow into the ocean, and that it would float the fish, the salmon, and the whales, and the dolphins, and that the water from this creek would contribute to this ecosystem, that all these fish were a part of. And then I imagined the sun evaporating those water molecules and carrying them up to form the clouds that would hopefully someday bring much needed rain back to California again. And I was just really taking my time with this, and mentally visualizing each step of the water cycle, and how connected all of the life that I know was to this single creek and to this single spring. And while I had my eyes closed, I all of a sudden realized that I was getting drenched. The water was like halfway up my legs, and my hands were completely wet, and my clothing was getting splashed, and my bottles had already filled. And I couldn't believe it. It was a real miracle. And I went back out and got my other bottles and put those in, and they filled up real fast, like even faster than they usually do. And then I got the other 2 bottles, and I filled all the bottles, and with just enough light, I ran back down that hill and had enough water for the week. So, yeah, this story still brings tears to my eyes. It was just such amazing confirmation that gratitude really works, and that we're so interconnected in ways that we haven't even begun to comprehend. So that's my story about gratitude and water, and how gratitude is such a powerful tool to connect us to all of life everywhere, not just plants, but every element, even things that we can't see. So raise our cups of cacao and give gratitude for gratitude. And I just want to plant that seed that, sometimes it's hard to give gratitude. Sometimes we have trouble accessing it, Sometimes we feel like we're stuck there. And the ways that I've overcome that is actually with a cup of cacao, where I'll just say whatever I can think of that I'm grateful for. Like, I am grateful for waking up today, or I am grateful for my toast for lunch, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Anything you can do to get started. And then that becomes a great gig. And then you can have a sip of cacao to activate that gratitude and bless that gratitude, because even the smallest gratitude is good enough. And then that begins to put me in the state of, oh yeah, I'm also grateful for this. And then I say that and sip another cup of cacao, take another sip of cacao, and then that brings me to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm grateful for this. And as I go down and give more gratitude and take more sips of cacao, my gratitudes get longer and they get more meaningful. They get to the deeper aspect of things, not just the surface things that I'm grateful for. And I just begin to realize how many things I have to be grateful for. And this is also a great activity to do with a friend. You can take turn giving gratitudes and taking sips, because having community to remind us of all the things that we're grateful for is also a really great tool. So in this back and forth, we actually discover our own gratitudes through relationship. So I'll leave it at that. Let's take a sip of cacao in gratitude for gratitude. Thank you. And I'm actually going to pause at this point in our ceremony. I have another story to share, but let's pause. So one of the tools I actually use to help me with gratitude is I keep a gratitude journal. I keep a running list of things I'm grateful for, because that's another way to jumpstart my gratitudes when I need it. So if at this moment in time you have a journal handy, take a moment and just list 5 things that you're grateful for today, just to get some gratitude flowing in all of your hearts. The way I use this list is I'm constantly updating it to keep it relevant. I mean, there's kind of the overarching gratitudes, like gratitude for the earth and gratitude for cacao, and then there's very specific gratitudes, and that's, I really encourage you to get as specific as possible. Like, one gratitude can be an entire story. It can be a full paragraph. You don't have to limit yourself to a few words or a few sentences. So allow yourself to find specificity in your gratitude. And I'll pause here for you to write for about the next 60 seconds to 2 minutes. So bringing that last gratitude to a close, maybe you have 5, maybe you just wrote 2 or 3, or have a dozen or more. All of it's perfect. I like to think of this as my gratitude basket. So I take in all this gratitude and just take a deep breath in and really feel that gratitude in your heart. and exhale it back out into the world. You know, gratitude is not about the spoken words. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It's about the feeling and really feeling in your heart. So take another breath in and just feel that gratitude as you exhale it. So I hope you find this practice of a gratitude basket useful and share it with others, and that it nourishes you and that you keep adding to it and find lots of things to add to it. So we've been to the rainforest in Belize on Martine's farm, and we've been to the coastal hills of Sonoma County, California, to the spring that I gathered water from. Now we're going to go back to a community in Guatemala called Chivite. It's a very small community of Maya farmers. It's not even on most maps. And this is one of the places we source cacao from for Firefly. It's about 20 farmers that we source from, and we buy a majority of the cacao there. And this place is like Cacao Narnia. It's like instantly magical when you get there. The village is on a slope above the Rio Cahabon, which translates to the Red Earth River. And on that side of the river, there is no road. It's just the village and the cacao farms. And then there's a long suspension bridge. They're quite long. It wiggles a lot. That goes to the other side where there's a dirt road. And that's the only access the villagers have to the rest of the world. So you can imagine they're quite far removed from our society. It's really unusual to see white people or Westerners there. So much so that when we were planning our first visit, and this is something we do regularly with our cacao origins, is we visit the farms that we source the cacao from to build relationship and to build connection. It's a part of rehumanizing the supply chain and creating transparency and trust, so that good ethics and good environmental practices can be verified, and that we can all feel good about the cups of cacao that we drink, because we're actually truly supporting sustainability in the ecosystem and in people's livelihoods. So we do these site visits, and this site visit was one of the more challenging ones to organize. We were told right off the bat that we likely wouldn't be able to bring our phones and cameras, which is a big part of our storytelling at Firefly, of how we share with the folks who drink our cacao about where it comes from. It's important for people to see it. And so we asked why. And the reason was that the last significant interaction the villagers had with white people was with surveyors for a company that wanted to build a dam on the Rio Cahabon, and quite likely flood their village. And so their association with cameras was of surveying equipment and of folks who were coming to take away the land that they lived on, and really that their ancestors had lived on. So it just like immediately made a lot of sense that there was trauma around this, and that we definitely didn't want to risk triggering that trauma through our visit. So we agreed to respect those guidelines, and at the same time, we knew that some time had passed since this event, and that we really wanted to tell the stories of the people there. So we asked if we could bring our cameras in our bags and not take them out unless we received express permission to do so, and that was accepted. So we went to this community. We met at the fermentation station, which is kind of at the edge of the roadside. Then we walked a little ways down the road, carrying all of our gear. We were going to do a homestay in the village that night, and we hiked across the river, went across the swaying bridge, and immediately just saw these ancient cacao trees on the other side that were many decades old, and just had beautiful leaves, beautiful pods, and we just felt enveloped by this sense of magic as we came to this village. And so we hiked up the slope, and it was quite a steep slope, and everybody there is accustomed to running up and down the slopes real fast. It took us a moment longer. And we actually we went out to the cacao farms and began talking about the cacao harvest and all the technicalities of growing cacao in the region and the different diseases that the farmers were trying to make sure that their harvest didn't succumb to, et cetera, et cetera. It's, an instant point of connection because we all work with cacao, we all love cacao. So we began sharing about cacao. And then we joined their community for lunch. We sat down at a super long table in a small, in kind of their longhouse, their village longhouse, hosted by the village elder, and we served their traditional food, and bowls of cacao. And this is kind of where it began to get interesting. So especially some of the younger folks in the community began asking us all sorts of questions because they hadn't really interacted with many white people. And here we were, myself and my brother, and then my coworker and a photographer, video person we had along with us. So it was two men and two women, all about 30 years old, and they were fascinated, and we felt accessible. And so they began asking us questions about what our life was like in the U.S. One of the questions that I'll always remember was, does everybody in the U.S. have a money printing machine in their home? Like, how do you get so much money? There are lots of questions about money. How much does it cost to fly from the U.S. to Guatemala? Like, how's that even possible for you? So we just began sharing about our lives, sharing about just our experience and just seeing how different it was for the villagers there, and feeling really grateful for their questions and for their curiosity about us. It really kind of took the conversation from just cacao, which you could say which is definitely a privileged conversation. We're coming to this village as the cacao buyers, but we're trying to get to the point of really being able to relate with them, and their curiosity really opened the gateway for a personal connection. And so after lunch, we went back out into the cacao forest, and we looked at some more cacao trees and cacao seedlings. And then at one point, we had brought these questions that we were so eager to share. And we asked if we could just kind of pause and sit down on the cacao leaf litter, and we all gathered around. And we asked, the questions that we wanted to know was, we wanted to understand the villagers' relationship with cacao. Because these are people who have grown cacao for decades, generation after generation after generation, and they are of Mayan, Quechua Maya descent. We felt like these people knew something about cacao that we didn't, and we were just so curious. And at the same time, we weren't sure if they would be willing to share their knowledge. Given their trauma with white people, and given kind of the lack of most Westerners' understanding of ceremony and working with plants. So we fortunately had a really good translator with us, and we began asking them, how do you relate with cacao? What are your traditional uses? How exactly do you work with this plant? Do you use it in any special traditions? Are there any celebrations that you work with cacao? And at first we were just kind of met with a little bit of a daze and some silence and some confusion. And then people began chattering with each other, and we couldn't understand or track what was going on. And then what came back to us through the interpreter was wait a moment, you really want to know? Nobody has ever asked us these questions, and we would love to share. This is the center point of our life. This is core to our spirituality. And it's amazing that you want to hear these questions, that you want answers to these questions. And so that was the seed for 2 more hours of conversation, where everybody was chiming in. It was kind of every person who was with us was being asked, like, oh, do you remember this thing we do for this harvest, or this tradition with cacao? And it blew us away. It was, perhaps one of the most intact living cacao traditions that I know of, and quite likely anywhere in the world. It's largely been sheltered from outside influence, and it was amazing to see cacao used not just for ceremony as we Westerners know it. We think of it as drinking cacao, doing a ceremony, coming together, or doing it on our own. But they use cacao for everything. They use cacao for shamanic rituals, for healing. They use cacao to build houses, to celebrate pretty much every single event. And they use cacao in all its forms. So not just cacao drinks, but they'll use the cacao paste, they'll use the cacao beans. For example, the beans are used in shamanic rituals. They place the cacao beans on a sick person, and ask the cacao to absorb the sickness into their body. And then the shaman will take the cacao beans and spread them far away from the land so that the sickness can go back into the land. I'd never heard of cacao being used in that way before. Similarly, when they construct a new house, they'll take some cacao paste, and when they dig the four corner holes for the posts, they'll actually put cacao paste in the ground first to kind of create the foundation and the connection from the earth to the wood, and to really bless that house for safety and prosperity. And again, I've never heard of people using cacao to build houses. And on and on and on. There's just so many rituals. We heard about cacao being used in dating rituals until WhatsApp came along. Most of them do have cell phones to communicate now. So cacao kind of lost its place in the dating routine and was one-upped by WhatsApp. But cacao used to be exchanged as part of dating rituals. And there's many, many more instances. We don't really have time to go into them all. But the key takeaway here was to ask good questions. That is this key way to getting deeper in any relationship that you're in. I think over the years I have learned that at times I didn't ask good questions of some of my most loved ones. And experiences like this and working with cacao have prompted me to ask better questions of people I care about in my life, and have deepened my relationships as a result. And the same goes for cacao. If you want to work with cacao and get to know cacao, ask cacao good questions. Don't just come to it and be like, tell me something. It's like, you can do that too, but you're far less likely to get kind of a useful response than if you actually come to it with specific inquiry. And plants being plants, cacao comes from a tree. Trees grow slowly. They don't necessarily need to answer immediately. So that the same goes for a cacao ceremony today. We have about 5 minutes left together. But when you go out into your day, this ceremony is just getting started. And you'll have a long time to keep working with the cacao afterwards, and pay attention. You can ask some questions before you go, and you might find surprising answers to those questions fairly quickly. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways of working with cacao for me, is that when I take the time to give gratitude and then set intentions and ask questions, I find resolutions to those intentions, answers to those questions really faster than I would expect myself to find them otherwise. And it's because I'm having help. I have this 10 million year old cacao elder working with me that is hearing my questions, and she gets to share her wisdom back. So it's really of no surprise. But of course, you also can't skip the gratitude. You can't just dive right in, because then you're back into this place of consume. I need answers to my question, give them to me. It doesn't work like that. You have to relate. So Yeah, I hope that story about the community in Chivite, who we, first of all, didn't even think we would be able to sort of get past the initial trauma necessarily. And by the way, they did encourage and welcome us to take photos as we built trust and relationship. And we have some amazing footage from there. So that came about as a result of the questions and the trust, and we're so looking forward to going back at some point when we can travel again. We actually followed that sharing by a cacao ceremony that where the women in the community actually prepared cacao their traditional way and wanted to show us how they make cacao. And then they wanted us to show them how we make cacao. And so we had both of our cacaos. We brought, of course, the cacao that they had grown for us. We brought it back and made cacao from their farms the way that we make it here to serve to our communities. And they made it the way, using their traditional recipe. And so we got to kind of share. We each had 2 cups of cacao. And it was just such a celebration. And the little ones were drinking it. Everybody had cacao all over their mouths, and we were just laughing and making music, and it was this real beautiful bridge building between communities that otherwise would have never met. So I give thanks to the cacao for bringing our communities together and for teaching me to ask better questions. And my prayer is that you also find some good questions today, and we're going to take a sip of cacao to help us find those questions, and take another minute in our journal to write down 5 questions that you can carry into your day today. Well, I'm sitting over here smiling at all the good questions you might have come up with, and wishing I could hear them. I wish I could hear them. I wish we could share them with each other. I have no idea how many people are on this call, but hopefully you can take those questions and share them with each other in your community, and take those questions out to feed more questions. That really, hopefully we all realize that it's actually better to have a whole bunch of really good questions than it is to have some answers, which inevitably, might be limiting. I just love having new things to learn about, and realizing what I don't know. I'll leave you just with a little seed about good questions from an animal kind of nature reconnection animal tracking school I got to participate in. They were teaching us bird language and how to pay attention to how birds communicate with each other, to get out of our just own species communication mind frame. And so we would come back to the instructors all excited and say, like, oh my goodness, I saw this bird and I think it's this. And the instructors would be like, great. What were the other birds doing near it? Where was the bird sitting? What direction was the wind blowing? Like, did you hear any other animals as you saw this bird? Like, basically, what are all the other details besides the name of this bird and your initial excitement? And not that that excitement is a bad thing, but harnessing our powers of observation and curiosity to ask questions about the natural world, that's, you know, that's the place where we come to deeper relationship. Is when we ask good questions about what's going on around us, when we probe our relationships with, you know, pure childish curiosity, when we humble ourselves and realize what we don't know, how much is out there that we don't know, that leaves a lot of room for magic. It leaves a lot of room for healing. It leaves a lot of room for this new era that we're all here to create and bring in. And I hope you find Cacao as a wonderful ally on that journey, and that you share it with each other in community, and you find a deep relationship there, or any other plant medicines that can help you do this, and bring in your unique gift into the world. It's such a constant process of refinement. So thank you for pausing today, taking a moment to hear a few of my stories, and to hear some of the farmers that have learned from their stories and experiences. So I'm just going to finish off this last sip of cacao I have here, give you all a global cacao cheers, and sending so much love out there. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day. Cacao!